I want you to stop calling it a banking update. That is the first mistake. When money, identity, and surveillance are built separately, people call it progress. When those three pieces begin to connect, it becomes something else. It becomes a permission ledger. And the man who understands a permission ledger too late does not lose his freedom in one dramatic moment. He loses it one convenience at a time. He taps his phone because it is faster. He scans his face because it is easier. He accepts a digital wallet because it gives him points. He signs into a website with a proof of human credential because bots have ruined the internet. Then one day he discovers the terrible part. The same machine that proves he exists can also decide what he is allowed to do. I am not here to interpret prophecy for you. I am not a preacher. I am not interested in turning finance into superstition, but I am very interested in incentives. And when I see a system being built where your money can carry rules, your identity can be verified by your body, and your movements can be monitored by software, I do not need a crystal ball. I only need arithmetic. The arithmetic says control becomes cheaper when it becomes digital. That is the punch in the face. The old world controlled people with force. The new world controls people with access. You do not need to send a policeman to a man's door if his payment fails at the gas station. You do not need to put him in a cell if his account cannot send money. You do not need to ban him from travel if his digital identity stops verifying. That is why this matters. Most people think freedom is lost when somebody breaks into the house. More often, freedom is lost when the house gets a smart lock and someone else controls the code. That is the master line of this entire story. The house is being rewired. The lights still work. The door is still open. The salesman tells you everything is safer now, but the control panel is no longer on your wall. It is somewhere else. And you had better understand who holds it. The first mechanism is permission money. Ordinary money is dumb. That is one of its virtues. A dollar bill does not ask where you are going. It does not ask what you believe. It does not ask whether a government database likes you. You hand it to another person and the transaction is finished. Digital money can be different. It can be faster. It can be cheaper. It can reduce fraud. It can also carry conditions. That is not science fiction. A digital payment system can know who sent the money, who received it, when it moved, where it moved, and whether the sender and receiver are allowed to transact under the rules loaded into the system. The danger is not that every digital dollar will automatically become a cage tomorrow morning. That is too simple. The danger is that the architecture makes the cage possible. And in finance, architecture always matters before intent. A safe can hold jewelry. It can also hold evidence. The metal does not care. The person with the key decides. That is why I pay attention when stablecoins are regulated as payment instruments and issuers are pulled under banking, anti-money laundering, customer identification, and sanctions rules. Those rules are not imaginary. They are already part of the official direction. You can call it safety, you can call it compliance, you can call it modernization. But the mechanism is simple. A digital dollar that must obey identity rules, sanctions rules, and issuer rules is no longer just a number. It is a number connected to a gate. Now ask the hard question, who controls the gate? Most people will not ask that. They will ask whether the app has a clean design. They will ask whether the transfer is instant. They will ask whether they get a 1% reward. That is the convenience trap. People rarely sell their freedom for tyranny. They sell it for speed. They sell it for ease. They sell it because the old way feels slow and the new way feels elegant. I have watched this happen in markets my whole life. Bad terms are easiest to accept when they come wrapped in a benefit. A credit card gives you points, then it charges 22% interest. A mortgage lets you own a house, then it owns 30 years of your labor. A buy now, pay later button makes the purchase painless. Then the payments become a leash. The same principle applies here. The digital payment system will not arrive wearing a villain's costume. It will arrive as convenience. It will say no more fraud. It will say no more bots. It will say no more money laundering. It will say no more waiting 3 days for settlement. All of that may be true, but every powerful system has two faces. One face solves the problem that gets it adopted. The other face creates the leverage that gets abused later. That is how serious investors think. We do not ask only what problem does this solve. We ask what power does it concentrate. The second mechanism is irreplaceable identity. A password can be changed. A credit card can be canceled. A bank account can be moved. Your eye cannot, your fingerprint cannot, your face cannot. That is why biometric identity is a different category of risk. World ID and similar proof of human systems are trying to solve a real problem. AI makes it harder to know whether an account is a person, a bot, or a machine wearing a human mask. That problem is real. Deepfakes are real. Fraud is real. Online impersonation is real. A society full of machines pretending to be people needs some way to verify humanity. So the sales pitch sounds reasonable. Scan once, prove you are human. Use that proof across apps, contracts, dating platforms, video calls, financial services, and maybe eventually anything that needs trust online. That sounds efficient. It may even become necessary, but the price of necessity is often obedience. Once identity becomes the key to every digital door, the issuer of the key becomes very powerful. If your identity credential fails, everything attached to it can fail. Your wallet, your travel, your online accounts, your contracts, your ability to prove you are not a bot. And here's the most dangerous part. The average person thinks about identity as a personal convenience. The system thinks about identity as an enforcement layer. Those are not the same thing. When I look at a business, I ask what happens when it scales. A restaurant with 10 customers is one thing. A chain with 10,000 stores is another. A digital identity used for one app is one thing. A digital identity that becomes the standard key to the internet is another. At small scale, it is a tool. At global scale, it becomes infrastructure. And infrastructure is never neutral for long. Railroads shape trade, pipelines shaped energy, credit cards shaped consumption. Search engines shaped information, social media shaped opinion, digital identity will shape access. That is why you cannot think of it as merely a login. It is not merely a login if the world builds on top of it. It is a passport for the digital economy. Now let me make the matter plain. I am not saying every person building these systems has bad intent. That is lazy thinking. Most dangerous systems are built by people solving real problems. The problem is not always malice. The problem is concentrated capability. If you build a machine that can exclude people from commerce, it does not matter that the first operator is kind. Eventually, the machine will be useful to someone less kind. That is the permanent law of power. Capabilities outlive intentions. The third mechanism is surveillance hardware. Digital money and digital identity are not enough by themselves to enforce a rule. A system must know where you are and what you are doing. That is where hardware enters. Cameras, phones, satellites, cell towers, license plate readers, border biometrics, smart vehicles, payment terminals, data centers, all of it looks separate. That is what makes it easy to ignore. The camera on the corner is sold as safety. The phone tracking is sold as navigation. The facial scan at the airport is sold as speed. The AI data center is sold as innovation. The smart car is sold as security. The bank monitoring is sold as anti-fraud. Each one has a perfectly good explanation when viewed alone. But wealth and power are rarely built from one asset. They are built from combinations. A railroad by itself is useful. A railroad plus coal mines plus ports plus financing becomes an empire. A phone by itself is useful. A phone plus identity plus payments plus location plus AI becomes a control surface. That is the part the average person misses. He sees tools. The planner sees a system. Now the world is building the physical layer that lets software touch reality. This is why AI infrastructure matters beyond the stock market. Data centers are not just warehouses full of chips. They are the factories of prediction. They process behavior. They classify risk. They optimize logistics. They detect patterns. They tell institutions what is likely to happen before it happens. That can make a hospital better. It can make a factory better. It can make a battlefield deadlier. It can also make a government more capable of watching the population. Again, the same machine has two faces, and I never invest by looking at only one face. Palantir is an example people understand because it sits at the crossroads of data, government AI, and decision systems. The company itself describes software that helps critical government and commercial institutions make real-time, AI-driven decisions. That is not a small market. That is not a small power. The value of a system like that is not simply that it stores data. The value is that it turns separate facts into one operational picture. This person bought this person traveled there, this person transferred money here, this person was near that place, this person is connected to those people, this person has this risk score. You do not need to believe every dark theory about the future to understand the danger. You only need to understand databases. The more databases connect, the less invisible you become. The fourth mechanism is the treasury demand loop. This is the part most people will miss, because it sounds less dramatic than eye scans and smart cameras. But in my experience, the boring mechanism is often the one that matters most. The United States runs on debt. It funds itself by selling obligations to the world. For decades, foreign governments, institutions, banks, pension funds, and investors have bought those obligations because the dollar sits at the center of global finance. But if confidence in that system weakens, the United States needs new buyers. Stablecoins can become one such buyer. A properly regulated payment stablecoin often needs safe liquid reserves. That commonly means treasury bills and similar assets. If people all over the world hold digital dollars through private apps, the reserve assets behind those dollars can support demand for U.S. debt. That is the clean version. The strategic version is even bigger. Export the dollar into every phone. Make it easy for people outside America to hold it. Make the private sector distribute it. Then wrap the system in regulation, identity, and compliance that supports the dollar. It supports treasury demand, it expands surveillance of financial flows, and it gives the government something very valuable: a retail market for its debt that lives inside payment technology. This is not automatically evil. But it is not innocent either. It is statecraft through payment rails. That is why stablecoins are not just crypto products. They are becoming monetary infrastructure. And once something becomes monetary infrastructure, investors must stop treating it like a fad. The question is not whether stablecoins are cool. The question is who benefits if they become a global dollar distribution machine. Issuers benefit, treasury markets may benefit, large asset managers may benefit, banks may fight, adapt, partner, or buy their way in. Payment networks may reposition, compliance software may grow, identity systems may attach, data companies may become more important. The ordinary citizen may receive faster payments and fewer frictions. He may also become more visible than any citizen in history. That is the bargain: speed in exchange for visibility, convenience in exchange for traceability, access in exchange for conditions. When a bargain is that large, you must read the fine print before the ink dries. The fifth mechanism is the crisis ratchet. Institutions rarely gain permanent power during calm periods. They gain it during emergencies. Then the emergency fades, the power remains. This pattern is old: wars expand state capacity. Financial panics expand central bank capacity. Terror attacks expand security capacity. Pandemics expand health surveillance capacity. Inflation expands monetary intervention. Each crisis creates a reason to move faster than normal politics would allow. That is why I pay close attention to the language of necessity. We had no choice. It was temporary. It was for safety. It was for stability. It was for the children. It was for public health. It was to stop fraud. It was to protect democracy. It was to stop money laundering. It was to prevent collapse. Sometimes those statements are true, but even true statements can be used to build permanent machinery. A dam built during a flood remains after the water falls. The crisis ratchet works the same way. The digital identity system may be justified by AI bots. The programmable payment system may be justified by fraud. The surveillance hardware may be justified by crime. The data platform may be justified by efficiency. The emergency may be justified by a pandemic, a war, a cyber attack, a banking crisis, a bond market shock, or a currency scare. The exact trigger is not the main point. The main point is that once the trigger appears, the infrastructure is already waiting, and when infrastructure is already waiting, adoption can happen very fast. That is what people learned during the last major global health crisis. Systems that would have taken years to debate were rolled out in weeks: QR codes, digital health passes, remote compliance, border restrictions, app-based permissions, emergency spending, emergency mandates. Some measures were temporary, some habits were not. That is the ratchet. It moves one click at a time. The sixth mechanism is the asset escape valve. Whenever government, technology, and money merge, the middle class tends to make the same mistake. They sit in the most controllable assets. They hold cash in one bank. They keep their retirement in products they do not understand. They own no business. They own no hard assets. They own no productive assets. They own no optionality. Then when the rules change, they are trapped inside the easiest cage to administer. A man with no assets has only a paycheck. A man with only a paycheck has only compliance. A man with only compliance does not negotiate. He waits, he hopes, he obeys. That is not how I like to live. A productive asset is a different creature. A good business produces goods and services people need. A well-financed property provides shelter. A farm produces food. A toll road collects fees. An energy asset delivers power. A diversified ownership stake in productive enterprises gives you a claim on human activity instead of just a number inside a permission system. That does not make you invincible. Nothing does. But it makes you less fragile. And in a world where money may become more traceable, more conditional, and more entangled with identity, the first duty is to become less fragile. Do not misunderstand me. I am not telling you to hide money. I am not telling you to break laws. I am not telling you to chase conspiracy trades. That is how foolish people get ruined. I am telling you to understand the difference between convenience and resilience. A convenient life has one bank, one app, one employer, one payment rail, one country, one source of income, one account, one password, and one point of failure. A resilient life has redundancy, multiple accounts, cash for short emergencies, productive assets, low debt, no dependency on a single platform, skills that travel, relationships that are not mediated entirely by apps, an identity that is not owned by one credential provider, a financial life that does not collapse. If one company changes one policy, that is not paranoia, that is risk management. I have run businesses for most of my life. A business with one supplier is fragile. A business with one customer is fragile. A business with one lender is fragile. A family is no different. If one switch can turn you off, you have not built wealth. You have built an account balance. There is a very big difference. This is where the identity flip must happen. Most people still think of themselves as consumers inside a system. They ask, what app should I use? What payment method is easiest? What platform gives the best reward? What verification gets me through the door fastest? That is the consumer mind. The owner mind asks different questions. Who controls the platform? What happens if access is denied? Can I move my money? Can I prove ownership without this one intermediary? Can I operate if this rail fails? Can I transact if this app freezes? Can my family function if the digital system is down? Can my assets survive policy pressure? Can I say no without being destroyed? That is the real test. Freedom is not the ability to say yes. Everyone can say yes. Freedom is the ability to say no and still function. A man who cannot say no is not free, he is merely comfortable. And comfort is often the anesthesia used before a system takes more control. Now let me give you the operating system, not slogans. Rules first. Separate useful technology from total dependency. Use digital tools. Do not worship them. A tool is something you can put down. A dependency is something you cannot live without. The moment an app becomes the only way you can bank, invest, communicate, verify, travel, or work, it has stopped being a tool. It has become a gatekeeper. Second, never let one institution hold your whole financial life. One bank is easy, two banks are better. 3 relationships are not ridiculous. If your livelihood matters, a brokerage account is useful. A separate emergency reserve is useful. Treasury access can be useful. A local banking relationship can be useful. A household that depends on one login is not modern. It is brittle. Third, keep some analog capacity. I know this sounds old-fashioned. I am old-fashioned about things that work. Have records, have documents, have printed copies of key information, know where your titles, deeds, insurance policies, account records, medical directives, tax returns, and important contacts are. If every proof of your life exists only behind a screen, then a failed screen can make you temporarily disappear. Fourth, own productive assets over time, not meme tokens, not fashionable stories, not whatever is being pumped by people who need exit liquidity. Productive assets, businesses with pricing power, broad ownership of good companies, real assets that serve real needs, cash flowing assets you understand. Skills that increase your earning power. The best answer to a more controlled money system is not panic, it is ownership. Fifth, reduce debt that makes you obedient. Debt is not always evil. I have used leverage when the asset, the terms, and the margin of safety made sense. But consumer debt is a leash. High interest debt makes a man desperate. A desperate man accepts terms he would reject if he had cash. If you want independence, start by removing the creditor from your kitchen table. Sixth, preserve lawful privacy. There is nothing wrong with privacy. Every bathroom has a door. Every bank has a vault. Every serious business protects its trade secrets. Every wealthy family understands discretion. Privacy is not criminal. Privacy is civilization. Do not confuse legal privacy with wrongdoing. Keep your affairs clean, documented, taxed properly, and organized. But do not volunteer every detail of your life to every platform that asks. Seventh, build human networks outside digital choke points. Know people, real people, local professionals, bankers, accountants, attorneys, doctors, neighbors, business owners, skilled tradesmen. The more the world moves into automated systems, the more valuable real relationships become. A machine can deny you. A person who knows you can help solve a problem. Eighth, stay calm. The worst thing you can do is become a frightened speculator. Fear makes people buy nonsense. Fear makes people sell good assets. Fear makes people follow loud men with bad incentives. The world can become more digital without becoming the apocalypse next Tuesday. Do not confuse preparation with hysteria. Preparation is quiet. Hysteria is noisy. The man who panics is still being controlled. Only the emotion has changed. This is the final point. You do not beat a control grid by screaming at it. You beat it by becoming harder to control. Harder to control financially, harder to control psychologically, harder to control through debt. Harder to control through one employer, harder to control through one bank, harder to control through one platform, harder to control through ignorance. That is the Buffett answer, not a bunker, not a fantasy, not an angry post on the internet, a fortress, built out of cash discipline, productive assets, simple habits, legal structure, optionality, and a refusal to trade every ounce of freedom for a little convenience. The future will not ask whether you like the change. It will ask whether you were prepared for it. Digital identity will probably grow. Stablecoins will probably grow. Tokenized assets will probably grow. AI surveillance will probably grow. Data infrastructure will probably grow. Central banks will keep studying digital money. Governments will keep asking for visibility. Companies will keep selling convenience. And ordinary people will keep clicking accept because the button is green and the line is short. Do not be ordinary in that sense. You can use the new world without surrendering your whole life to it. You can invest in innovation without worshiping it. You can hold digital assets without believing every promise attached to them. You can own technology companies without pretending they are charities. You can understand the risks without living in fear. That balance is rare, but it is the balance that survives. I have always preferred businesses I can understand. I prefer incentives I can trace. I prefer managers whose behavior matches their words. I prefer assets that produce something. I prefer systems with margins of safety. Apply the same thinking to your own life. If a system asks for your eye, your money, your location, your identity, your contacts, and your consent, do not ask only what you receive today. Ask what you cannot take back tomorrow. Because that is the cost most people ignore. You can change an app, you can close an account, you can sell a stock, you can move a bank relationship. But when a society builds its commerce around a verified identity and conditional payment rail, leaving becomes harder. That is why the time to prepare is before the permission layer becomes invisible. Once the gate is everywhere, people stop seeing the gate, they simply call it life. I do not want you to wake up one morning and discover that the modern world has turned every transaction into a vote on your obedience. I want you to wake up before that, own productive assets. Keep low debt, maintain redundancy, protect lawful privacy. Do not surrender your identity casually. Do not confuse digital convenience with financial sovereignty. Do not let your children inherit a life where every purchase requires silent approval from a system they cannot question. The old mark of power was a uniform, a crown, a badge, a wall. The new mark of power may be a credential, a wallet, an account status, a risk score, a compliance flag. It may not look frightening. It may look clean. It may look modern. It may even look helpful. That is precisely why you must be awake. A cage built from iron is easy to hate. A cage built from convenience is harder to see. And the most dangerous prison is the one that feels like progress until the first time you try to leave.